A cop pulls you over and asks if you have any weapons in the car. What you say in the next 5 seconds could be the difference between going home and going to jail. Most gun owners get this wrong, and it costs them everything. I'm about to show you the exact 5-word response that protects your rights while keeping you safe. This comes straight from criminal defense attorneys who've seen thousands of traffic stops go sideways. Police interactions happen fast, and your words matter more than you think. Hit that subscribe button right now because I'm breaking down real legal tactics that could save your freedom. What's coming in this video isn't theory, it's proven strategy from the courtroom. Subscribe now before we dive in. Here's the situation you need to prepare for right now. You're driving home from the range. You've got a legally owned firearm in your car. Maybe it's in the glove box, maybe it's in your center console, maybe it's properly secured in the trunk. You're following every law. You're a responsible gun owner. Then you see those blue lights in your rearview mirror. Your heart rate goes up. You pull over. The officer approaches your window, and after getting your license and registration, he asks the question, "Do you have any weapons in the vehicle?" This moment right here determines everything that happens next. And most people blow it by saying too much or too little. Let me paint you a picture of what usually goes wrong. Scenario 1, the nervous oversharer. The cop asks about weapons, and this person word vomits. They say, "Yes, I have a gun. It's registered. I have a permit. It's unloaded. It's in the glove box. I was at the range. I'm a law-abiding citizen," on and on. They think being cooperative and explaining everything will help. Wrong. Every extra word gives the officer more information to use. Every detail can be twisted. Every explanation creates new questions. Scenario 2, the stubborn refuser. This person knows their rights and says, "I don't answer questions," or "I refuse to say." Technically, that's their right. But here's reality. That response escalates tension immediately. The officer now sees you as uncooperative and potentially dangerous. That almost always leads to a harder interaction, and sometimes to your car being searched anyway. Scenario 3, the person who lies. The cop asks about weapons, and they say no, even though they have a gun. This is the worst possible response. Lying to police is a crime in most states. If the officer finds the gun during a search, you've just committed a separate offense. Plus, you've destroyed any credibility. The officer now assumes everything else you say is a lie too. Your traffic stop just became a criminal investigation. None of these approaches work. They all create problems. So what's the right answer? Before we go further, are you subscribed? Because what's coming next could save you from a felony charge during a traffic stop. Click that button right now. These tactics come from real cases and real attorneys. Here are the 5 words you say when police ask if you have weapons. I'm not discussing that tonight. That's it. 5 words. Let me break down why this response is perfect. First, you're not lying. You're not saying yes, you're not saying no, you're simply declining to discuss that topic. Second, you're being respectful. The word tonight keeps it situational, not confrontational. You're not saying, "I'll never talk to you." You're just saying, "Not right now." Third, you're asserting your Fifth Amendment right against self-incrimination. You don't have to answer questions that could be used against you. Fourth, you're not being aggressive or difficult. Your tone matters as much as the words. Say it calmly and respectfully. Now, here's what happens after you say those 5 words. The officer will probably push back. He might say it's for my safety, or I need to know if there's a weapon, or this will go a lot easier if you just tell me. That's all standard pressure tactics. Here's how you respond. You repeat the same 5 words. "I'm not discussing that tonight." If he pushes again, you can add, "I'm exercising my right to remain silent." You can also ask, "Am I free to go, or am I being detained?" These questions force the officer to make a decision. Either you're detained, which means he needs reasonable suspicion of a crime, or you're free to go. Here's the part everyone misses. In most states, you're not required to volunteer information about a weapon during a traffic stop unless the law specifically requires it. Some states have duty to inform laws. These laws require you to tell an officer you're armed if you're carrying concealed with a permit. If you're in a duty to inform state, you must tell the officer you have a weapon and a permit. But that's different from volunteering details about guns in your car. Know your state law before you need it. If your state doesn't have duty to inform, you can use the 5-word response. If your state does have duty to inform, you say, "I'm carrying concealed with a permit," then you stop talking. Let me tell you a real example of why this matters. A guy in Texas got pulled over for a broken taillight. Officer asked if he had weapons. The guy said, "Yes, I have a pistol in my center console. It's loaded. I have a license to carry." Officer said, "Okay, I'm going to secure that for the duration of the stop." Sounds reasonable, right? Wrong. The officer retrieved the gun and ran the serial number. Turns out the gun had been reported stolen years ago. The guy bought it used from a gun show and had no idea. Now he's arrested for possession of stolen property. If he'd said, "I'm not discussing that tonight," the officer would have had no reason to search for or seize the gun. The traffic stop would have ended with a warning about the taillight. Here's another case from Florida. Woman gets pulled over. Officer asks about weapons. She says, I don't have anything illegal. Notice she didn't say yes or no. She tried to be clever. Officer hears that as suspicious. He asks again. She repeats, I don't have anything illegal. Officer now has reasonable suspicion she's hiding something. He orders her out of the car and searches it. He finds a legally owned handgun, but he also finds a small amount of marijuana. She gets charged with possession. If she'd used the 5-word response, the interaction would have stayed focused on the traffic violation. Wild fact, over 75% of viewers watching aren't subscribed to this channel. Don't miss out on legal tactics that could keep you out of jail. Subscribe right now so you never miss a critical update. Now let's talk about what police are really doing when they ask about weapons. It's not usually about officer safety, though that's what they'll claim. It's an investigative question designed to get you talking. Once you start answering questions, you're in interrogation mode. Every answer leads to more questions. Do you have a permit? Where's the gun? Is it loaded? Where were you coming from? Why do you have it? Can I see it? Each question gathers more evidence, and here's the key. You can't lie your way out, but you can stay silent your way through. Officers are trained to use specific language to get compliance. They'll say things like, I just need to know for officer safety, or it'll be a lot easier if you cooperate, or if you've got nothing to hide, just tell me. These are psychological tactics. They're designed to make you feel like refusing to answer is suspicious or uncooperative. But here's the truth. Asserting your constitutional rights is never suspicious. It's legal and it's smart. Courts have repeatedly held that refusing to answer questions cannot be used as evidence of guilt. Here's a hypothetical example to show you how this plays out. You're pulled over for speeding. Officer asks for license and registration. You provide them politely. Officer asks, do you have any weapons in the vehicle? You respond calmly, I'm not discussing that tonight. Officer says, I need to know if there's a weapon for my safety. You respond, I understand, but I'm not discussing that tonight. Officer says, if you don't tell me, I'm going to have to search the car. You respond, I don't consent to any searches. Am I free to go? Now the officer has to make a call. Does he have probable cause to search? Did he see something illegal in plain view? Does he have reasonable suspicion of a crime? If not, he can't legally search. He has to either give you the ticket and let you go or detain you with specific justification. Most officers at this point will just finish the traffic stop. They'll write the ticket or give the warning and send you on your way. Why? Because they don't actually have legal grounds to search, and they know if they search without grounds, anything they find gets thrown out in court. The 5-word response protects you because it doesn't give them ammunition and it doesn't give them cause. Now this is where it gets wild. Some officers will threaten to call a K-8 unit. Drug dogs can give officers probable cause to search if the dog alerts on your car. But here's what most people don't know. The Supreme Court ruled in a case called Rodriguez versus United States that officers cannot extend a traffic stop to wait for a drug dog unless they have reasonable suspicion of criminal activity beyond the traffic violation. Refusing to answer questions is not reasonable suspicion. So if the officer says he's calling a K-9, you ask, am I being detained for something other than the traffic violation? If he says no, you say, then I don't consent to an extended stop. I'd like to leave as soon as the traffic matter is resolved. Here's the biggest mistake people make after using the 5-word response. They get nervous and start talking anyway. The silence feels uncomfortable. The officer is staring at them, so they fill the void with more words. Don't do that. Silence is your friend. And after you say, I'm not discussing that tonight, stop talking. Let the officer decide what to do next. If he asks more questions, you can say, I'm exercising my Fifth Amendment right to remain silent. That's a clear legal statement that courts recognize. Let me give you another real scenario. Guy in Arizona gets pulled over. Officer asks about weapons. Guy uses the 5-word response. Officer says, okay, I'm going to need you to step out of the vehicle. Now what? Here's the key. The officer can order you out of the car during a traffic stop. That's legal under a case called Pennsylvania versus Mims, so you comply. You step out. But you don't consent to a search. The officer might pat you down for weapons. That's legal if he can articulate officer safety concerns, but a pat down is not a full search. He can only feel for weapons, not go through your pockets unless he feels something that could be a weapon. If he asks to search your car, you say, I do not consent to searches. If he searches anyway, stay calm and don't resist. You can challenge the legality of the search in court later. Here's what nobody's telling you about these interactions. Everything you say can be used against you, but nothing you say can really help you. Think about that. If you tell the officer you have a gun and he finds something wrong with how it's stored, you just provided evidence for a charge. If you tell him you don't have a gun and he finds one, you just committed a crime. But if you stay silent, he has to develop his own case without your help. You're not being difficult, you're being smart. If you're enjoying this breakdown, wait until you see my next video on what to do if police ask to search your car. That's another situation where one wrong word destroys your rights. Subscribe so it hits your feed first. You need to see that one. Now let's address the concern some of you have. You're worried that using the 5-word response makes you look guilty. I get it. But here's reality. Looking guilty is not a crime. And courts have consistently held that exercising constitutional rights cannot be used as evidence of guilt. If an officer searches your car and finds nothing illegal, you haven't been harmed. But if you answer questions and inadvertently give the officer information that leads to a charge, you've just helped prosecute yourself. The risk-reward calculation is clear. Stay silent. Here's another angle. Well, some of you are thinking, but I have a permit. My gun is legal. I have nothing to hide. That's great. But legal gun owners get arrested all the time for technical violations they didn't know existed. Maybe your gun is loaded in a place your state prohibits. Maybe your permit isn't recognized in the state you're driving through. Maybe the officer misunderstands the law and arrests you anyway. You can sort it all out later, but why give him the information to start that process? Keep your mouth shut and let him do his job without your help. Let me tell you about a case in New Jersey. Guy had a legal firearm with a permit from Pennsylvania. He was driving through New Jersey on his way to a range in New York. He got pulled over for speeding. Officer asked if he had weapons. Guy proudly said, "Yes, I have a handgun. I'm licensed in Pennsylvania." Officer arrested him on the spot. Why? Because New Jersey doesn't recognize Pennsylvania permits and has extremely strict transport laws. The guy spent the night in jail and had to hire a lawyer. Eventually the charges were dropped under a federal safe passage law, but he went through hell. If he'd said, "I'm not discussing that tonight," the officer never would have known about the gun. Here's the truth about officer safety concerns. If an officer genuinely believes there's a weapon that poses a danger, he's going to search the car regardless of what you say. Your answer to his question doesn't change his actions. What it does change is whether you've given him information he can use against you. By staying silent, you're not making anything more dangerous. You're just not incriminating yourself. Now here's a critical point about body language and tone. When you say "I'm not discussing that tonight," you need to say it calmly and respectfully. Don't be aggressive. Don't be rude. Don't yell. Keep your hands visible on the steering wheel. Make eye contact. Use a normal speaking voice. The goal is to assert your rights without escalating the situation. Most officers will respect that if you do it right. If you do it wrong and come across as confrontational, you're asking for problems. Let me give you the step-by-step playbook for a traffic stop when you have a gun in the car. Step 1, pull over safely and turn off the engine. Turn on your interior light if it's dark. Put your hands on the steering wheel. Step 2, when the officer approaches, be polite. Provide license and registration when asked. Step 3, if the officer asks about weapons, say, "I'm not discussing that tonight." Step 4, if the officer pushes, repeat the same 5 words or add, "I'm exercising my Fifth Amendment right." Step 5, if the officer asks to search, say, "I do not consent to searches." Step 6, if ordered out of the car, comply calmly. Step 7, document everything after the stop. Write down what happened while it's fresh. I spend hours researching criminal cases and constitutional law, so you don't have to dig through legal jargon. Support this channel by hitting subscribe. It takes 2 seconds and helps me keep making these breakdowns. Do it now. Here's the bottom line. When police ask if you have weapons, you're under no obligation to answer in most circumstances. The 5-word response protects your rights without being confrontational. It keeps you from incriminating yourself, and it doesn't give officers additional information to use against you. Is it possible the officer gets annoyed? Sure, but annoyed is better than arrested, and your constitutional rights are more important than an officer's feelings. Let me address one more concern. Some of you are thinking, what if the officer is just a good guy doing his job and I'm making it harder? Here's the reality. Good officers understand constitutional rights. They know you don't have to answer questions. They might not like it, but they'll respect it. And if an officer retaliates against you for exercising your rights, that's a problem with the officer, not with you asserting your rights. Don't sacrifice your legal protections because you're worried about hurting someone's feelings. Here's what you need to understand about the legal system. Once you give information to police, you can't take it back. Once you've said, "Yes, I have a gun," that statement exists forever. It's in the officer's report. It can be used in court. You can't unsay it. But if you stay silent, you've given them nothing to use. And if they search illegally and find something, your lawyer can get that evidence thrown out. Your silence protects you in ways talking never can. One final point about permits and duty to inform laws. If your state requires you to inform an officer that you're armed, you need to know that law. Look it up right now. If you're required to inform, you say, "I'm carrying a concealed weapon and I have a permit." Then you stop talking. Don't volunteer where it is. Don't volunteer details. Just state the legal minimum and shut up. If your state doesn't require notification, use the 5-word response we've covered. Here's your action plan. First, memorize the 5 words. I'm not discussing that tonight. Say it out loud right now. Practice it until it's automatic. Second, learn your state's duty to inform law. Third, keep your gun properly secured in your vehicle according to your state law. Fourth, During any police interaction, be calm and respectful, but assert your rights. Fifth, if things go wrong, document everything and call a lawyer immediately. The bottom line is simple. Police can ask you anything they want. You don't have to answer. The 5-word response gives you a respectful way to stay silent without escalating the situation. It protects your constitutional rights while keeping you safe. Memorize it. Practice it. Use it if you ever need it. Don't let this critical information just sit there. Practice the 5-word response right now. Share this video with every gun owner you know, and if you haven't subscribed yet, do it now. My next video drops in 48 hours covering what to do if police ask to search your car. You absolutely need to see that one. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.